Though if I had foreseen how swift would be his onset and answer, maybe I should not have dared to show myself. Bare time was given me to come to your aid. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are looking at how Sauron could have won the War of the Ring, different strategies he might have used to achieve victory in the war. Obviously, the story is told in a perfect way, depicting the downfall of Sauron's evil due to his tyrannical and arrogant nature, but this is more of a thought experiment on how he might have won. Thank you all so much for joining me. Let's begin our tale. Before diving into the war itself, I think it's fair to reflect upon Sauron's timing. He only started the war after being ousted from Dol Guldur and taking some time, a few decades, to rebuild his armies and Mordor. One strategy from the outset that he might have changed is, rather than going on the offensive when he did in 3018 of the Third Age, he might have continued to wait and wait, while supplementing his own defensive forces and perhaps sending out smaller strike forces on his enemies to ensure Gondor did not get too powerful either. One thing Sauron always had on his side was time, since he was an immortal Maiar, and though he waited throughout most of the Third Age before launching a war to regain his One Ring of old, he might have continued to do so, hoping for the elves to continue diminishing, or for other foes to continue weakening the factions of Gondor, Rohan, the elves, the dwarves, and so forth. Perhaps if he waited long enough, he could wait for the One Ring to start causing more and more havoc amongst his enemies, and then he could strike. Yet, to be fair to Sauron's position, strategically, he could not have known that waiting longer would necessarily boost his militaristic position. However, it is more likely that the One Ring would potentially find its way to him, especially if he had held back militaristically, but still sent forth the Nazgul to seek Baggins and to find the ring. Thus we come to our next potential change of strategy that might have worked in Sauron's favor. The Nazgul were close at times to getting the ring from Frodo during the early parts of Frodo's journey, yet Sauron pivoted them to engage as commanders in war instead, placing some of them in Dol Guldur as the war in the north took place, and as leaders of Orcish missions, such as those near the Anduin or invasions of Gondor. If perhaps the Nazgul had been recloaked and then taken up their former mission of roving the countryside in search of Frodo, they might have actually had victory in securing the ring in such a way. Sure, they were strong on the front lines, commanding fear in the hearts of the Three Peoples, but as the Fellowship continued to journey and even split up, a Nazgul showing up in the most inopportune time would have afforded Sauron a decisive victory, such as if a Nazgul came upon the hobbits in the Dead Marshes, even though one, of course, flew over in the canon and did not see them, or in Ithilien or the like. Now, with this one, it becomes clear that Sauron sort of loses sight of who actually possesses the ring during points in the story. Obviously, at the beginning, he knows that some sort of Baggins character holds the ring, but he is also afraid when he thinks Saruman captured Pippin, and potentially the ring as well, and probably didn't even know who the Hobbit was, or he became arrogant when he thought Aragorn would try to use the ring against him at the Black Gate, and thought that that would be the Free People's plan. He might not have even known where to look, but also even who to look for. Yet at the same time, if the Nazgul had maintained their search for Frodo and the ring, I imagine that eventually that would have been absolutely detrimental to Frodo in the wild. Now, speaking of Aragorn, Sauron ended up making another militaristic mistake when he attacked Minas Tirith after seeing Aragorn through the Palantir. Again, to be fair to Sauron here, he could not have known that he was also bound to lose this battle since he had so many forces arrayed for the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and Aragorn somewhat laments the fact that he himself spoke so soon and hardly came to Gondor's aid in time in that quote at the beginning of this video. Yet, the West still had victory over Sauron whilst fighting the most bitter of odds. If Aragorn had not done this, in fact, and did wait before speaking to Sauron through the Seeing Stone, he actually might not have helped himself and his side, but Sauron instead, who still could have benefited more from preparing for the invasion of Gondor, even more so. If Sauron had taken more time before invading Gondor, he might have found success there, defeating the most strategic opponent facing Mordor at the time. Now, another change in strategy that definitely would have benefited the Dark Lord would be a rather obvious one. He was insanely arrogant. Very much so, apparently, as he did not even set a watch upon Mount Doom, the one place his ring might be destroyed and all of his plans come to ruin, especially knowing that the One Ring was in motion and in the possession of his enemies. I imagine that if he would have collapsed the entrance to Sammath Naur into Mount Doom, or so on and so forth, or even just set up some sort of guard, likely that would have changed the war entirely in his favor. A few more strategies, but these ones with more speculation and a bit more stretching on my end than these past few, might have also been utilized to a helpful degree by the Dark Lord. If Sauron had acted swifter to make an alliance with the dragon Smaug while he was in Dol Guldur before the war, he might have actually used the dragon more strategically to wipe out his enemies, especially in the north. Sauron also potentially could have maybe crafted more rings of power since he did know how. Of this, I am super unsure, and it probably requires its own video exploration why he never forged more rings of power. But if he did create more rings, and perhaps more Nazgul, he might have had far greater power at his disposal. I'm sure there is a canonical answer that we'll explore at some other point as to why this never happened, but if he did craft more even relics of power with his abilities and his knowledge, again, this definitely would have been of a strategic benefit to him. Sauron also knew that Saruman was treacherous and out for himself. If, somehow, Sauron had convinced Saruman to further join the fold of Mordor, or even set some sort of oversight on the Wizard of Many Colors, potentially Saruman would have been a better used pawn, and might have had victory in Rohan, which would have allowed him to further help Sauron against Gondor and search for the ring. These are all at least some of the ways that Sauron might have changed his course or strategy to win the War of the Ring. Some of these are certainly major strategic changes, while others were a little bit smaller in scale, some tactics that could have gone differently. But what do you all think? How could Sauron have won the War of the Ring in some other ways? It is interesting examining this from Sauron's side, in fact, as I wrote the script, as seeing the War of the Ring from this side, again, maybe another future video, makes him and his forces seem actually less terribly powerful or imminent of domination. There weren't too many options he could have done differently in the war to make sure that he won, even though Sauron's side seems so incredibly powerful throughout the whole war, but it was an interesting exploration nonetheless. So, my friends, we come to the end of our tale. From this tale, we see that we must never take victory or defeat as a guarantee. Such outcomes depend entirely on the crucial choices we make here and now. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. Let me know your thoughts on this. Are there any other ways Sauron might have changed course to win? Share them with me in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery Lord of the Rings swords, statues, or other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and please use the code WEST at checkout. And also, please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks so much to our Valor Tier patrons and YouTube members, Peter Shepard, Merton, John Hume, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswild Project, Theodore, Moon Viper, Andrew Carlisle, and Zumi, and Brian Hunley, our newest Valor Tier patron. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. I'll see you all again next week with a video on the first kings of Lorien and Mirkwood. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.